is going to be a little bit of a different feel than what everybody's used to. I still hope that it will be informative and interesting, and I'm, as always, more than happy to take questions and engage in any discussion at the end. I figured that I'd start today with a little bit of a look back. It's a very busy time in Washington, as I'm sure you're well aware, and I will address in a few minutes. But I wanted to do a quick review of a great event that IEEE-USA hosted a couple weeks ago in Little Rock, Arkansas. This was an inaugural event for us. As many of you know, we have been involved in things like the CHIPS Act for a long time. That particular legislation created tons of different funding streams. One of them, administered by the NSF, was targeted at smaller markets around the country to kind of encourage investment and growth in STEM and related industries. And one of those regions, one of those markets is Little Rock, Arkansas. So we decided that we would try and tap into that. And this particular conference started out as an idea about a year ago to really bring more information to these smaller market regions about federal funding opportunity like the CHIPS Act, but not simply related to that. And so we picked Little Rock for our first one, and we titled it the Innovation Workforce and Research Conference, or iWorks. And we kicked it off a couple of weeks ago, and it was a smashing success. We had a 2-day workshop where we brought together stakeholders from academia, government, and industry to kind of try and bind some connective tissue between research and commercially viable products. We had experts from the whole region discussing things like research grants, tech transfer programs, startup, IP, lots of other topics related to essentially empowering innovation in that particular region. And it was, like I said, it was a really big success. And what I think we'd like to impart to everybody and really start getting the word out is that this was the first, but will not be the last. We are looking to recreate this model in other regions of the country that are similarly situated as Little Rock, where there is a hunger and a thirst and an interest in growing STEM, in growing innovation, and growing tech, and where there is now a little bit more federal funding opportunities there. So watch this page. We will be rolling out some new dates and some new locations for 2024 here soon. But I wanted to kind of just highlight some of that because at least from a government relations perspective, we did our best to kind of bring in local politicians and elected officials and others who were also federally interested in stuff that we were doing. We had the mayor of Little Rock open the event. We had the state secretary of commerce come speak on a panel. We had reps from various federal agencies like FDA, NSF, DIA, NIST, as well as a host of other state and local government organizations. So great success. We look to be doing it again in the future. So I think region 5 was well represented there, and we look to bring in other regions as we move forward. So now let's go to the topic du jour. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that we are headed for a federal government shutdown here in Washington. It's a very interesting time, and we have sort of turned the page. It feels like the difference between yesterday and today is pretty stark. I think leading up to today, there was still this slight glimmer that there may be a deal reached where at least a shutdown could be averted for a short period of time. But today, it sort of really feels like it's real. And essentially what we're looking at is a full shutdown of federal operations with some caveats starting this weekend. And really, this kind of stems from a July deal that the president and House Republican leadership struck when they were facing another crisis related to the federal debt ceiling. That particular deal had specific spending levels that were essentially supposed to be implemented during this new FY24 appropriation cycle, which is supposed to begin or will begin on October 1. Problem is, a lot of House Republicans in particular really never liked that original deal and are now flat out opposing any new spending and any package that doesn't include certain priorities that they have highlighted. Among those, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about these border security issues, aid to Ukraine, whether or not there is enough juice to try and proceed with impeachment proceedings of the president. A lot of stuff that is really important to the House Freedom Caucus and other certain conservative factions, particularly in the House. Add to that the fact that the Senate is controlled by the Democrats, and of course the White House is as well. There is just no give there for any agreement to be had. And so we are almost certainly going to see a shutdown on the 1st. And one of the reasons I say it feels different between yesterday and today, I'm all the news I'm picking up and sort of the chatter is that, and if you are a federal employee, you are living this and you know this much better than I do. There are notices, official notices now going out from heads of agencies and from cabinet offices to employees in the federal government. There's a much more reporting on what it looks like for your paycheck, for your day-to-day life, if and when the government does shut down. I've been a member of a federal credit union here in Washington, D.C. for a long time, and a lot of its members are obviously federal employees, and got an email about an hour ago with some 0% interest loan options for a short time, just in case you're a federal employee who needs some assistance. So it's feeling very real. It's almost certainly going to happen. There's a lot of differentiation between who won't get paid, who has to report to work, who doesn't have to report to work, and it really kind of depends on which agencies and which functions of the federal government are subject to this annual appropriations process, which has kind of gotten out of whack, certainly for the last few years, and is likely to derail here in the next few days. But a lot of essential services will continue. So you're going to hear things about furlough. You're going to hear things about essential services, non-essential services. And it's going to be a big news cycle for some time now. How long this is going to go, I have no idea. In a perfect world, there'd be sort of a meeting of the minds, and Congress would pass a short-term CR, a congressional or continuing resolution, which essentially continues funding at current levels for a set period of time. Usually it's anywhere from a week to 2 months. My best guess is that we will shut down. It will go at least a week, but that there will be a CR sort of short-term solution out there that might be grabbed onto and passed. And this goes through regular legislative order. So whatever CR legislation is put forth has to pass in both chambers in identical language and then be signed by the president. So even within that mini debate, under the umbrella of the larger debate, there's a lot of politics and a lot of contentious issues that are playing out. So like I said, if you're a federal employee, you're living this. If you're a contractor, if you work with or married to a federal employee, this is very live now, and I know it can be pretty scary. We are doing our best to kind of track it and are available for any questions if there are sort of a lack of resources that you feel like we could be filling in on. So please let us know. Just for context, I know it feels like we talk about shutdown a lot, but it really hasn't happened a lot. At least not more than a day or two. If it goes in through the weekend, that tends to have very little impact on the economy and the news cycle and whatnot. It's when we get to Monday where things start to get very real and it starts to really ratchet up in terms of the pressure. We've had this a few times since the mid-90s. The big one was the standoff between President Clinton and the Republican Congress then. But then the last one we had was the end of 18 into 19. And that was for 35 days, which is pretty significant. And if you were around that at all, you will remember that was not fun. So we are headed for one, and we are going to do our best to stay on top of things for everybody and are happy to be a resource as needed. In the meantime, the business otherwise of Congress, of policy, of IEEE-USA's government relations team continues. We have had a pretty active couple of weeks on the AI front. I just want to highlight 3 particular action items that we have been involved in, often partnering with others in like-minded ways. Just yesterday, we partnered with ASME to host a pretty successful briefing in the Senate office buildings in conjunction with the Senate AI caucus to talk about STEM workforce development needs around AI. AI all the time is sort of it's one of the biggest topics right now from a policy perspective in Washington. And there's no congressional committee, no agency, no federal agency that it is not touching. And it's sort of slowly growing and morphing as policymakers and staff really grapple with what this means, what it means for the issues that they have oversight or regulatory authority over. And IEEE and IEEE-USA and our volunteers and our members are really at the forefront of being that resource and that sounding board and those advisors to a lot of these policymakers to understand what this means from a technical perspective. And for those of you that have participated in that, we thank you. We're going to be calling on you again and again, because this is not going away. So the briefing yesterday went great. I got rave reviews from our staff and from others who were there. There were a lot of questions from congressional staff and that focused kind of on the prevalent worry that AI is going to take jobs, and what is the federal government going to do about this, both for the internal and external workforce. And the panelists, I think, were fairly honest in saying that when new technology like this comes onto the marketplace this sudden, there is a shift in jobs. There may not be a net loss in jobs overall, but shift will occur. The market will change. The need for upskilling is vital, as is funding for R&D. And we policymakers, the country needs to really try and find a way to make AI a tool and a partner for the workplace, rather than kind of a replacement for workers, or really the threat. Obviously a very difficult needle to thread. So it was a great conversation, and we were really proud to join ASME in kind of co-hosting that. IEEE Standards Association has been active as well. They're sort of on point in a lot of the technical aspects of our AI work. They submitted a very long and lengthy white paper in response, submission in response to a white paper from the Senate HELP Committee, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, on essentially oversight issues related to the policy issues within that committee's jurisdiction: health, education, labor, pensions, and the like. It was a great submission. I think we now have it up on our website if you'd like to see it. And then just today, I think right now, actually, our staff is meeting with the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee staff to kind of follow up on a hearing that committee held on AI and federal acquisition and procurement. We've got some of our volunteers and experts in the field in that meeting as well. So we remain really active on a lot of issues. This is just one of them, and continues to be pretty hot for a long time. And then a lot of the other just sort of bills and other issues that we're tracking. And I know Aline has talked about a lot of these in the past, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about every single one of them. I don't frankly know about a lot of the details of them, but I know that these are priorities for us. The National Defense Authorization Act, you have to list that first, because in addition to the federal funding and appropriation stuff that's going on, the NDAA fight is out there as well, and is sort of a sub story underneath everything that's happening in Washington. As I think folks know, the Senate and House have each passed their own version of an authorizations bill, and they have yet to kind of conference those and come to an agreement in the formal process that you normally would to get legislation then to the president to be signed. This thing has sort of a record of 60 plus years of bipartisan support, and everybody in the room knows it. But we're dealing with the politics of today and an environment that's very difficult and very challenging to get even the most popular legislation across the finish line. This is, at the end of the day, a bill that would authorize almost $900 billion in national security spending, largely going to the Defense Department. And many of our members and volunteers are intimately involved in so many programs related to that spending. And so this is another one that we are tracking. We have a list of priority provisions that we're in each of the two bills. Some we like in each, some we don't like in each. We're working through a lot of like-minded coalitions to make sure that our voices are made and that any changes, edits that our members and the industry needs takes place. So we're kind of looking forward to seeing some progress on that. But you know, again, it's one that needs to play out in a very hostile environment. The last thing I think I will just sort of mention before we open it up to some comments and questions, I sort of started with looking back at a great event a couple weeks ago. I'm kind of wrapping up now, talking about sort of what's going on in Washington now in terms of our policy priorities and initiatives. And I'm going to preview another event that we are involved in. This one is taking place at the very beginning of November in San Diego, and is very specific to the CHIPS Act itself. Whereas the one in Little Rock sort of was birthed from some of the funding priorities in the CHIPS Act. It wasn't necessarily specific to that legislation. California, obviously, given its position in the fab industry, is ripe for a much deeper conversation on semiconductors, on the supply chain, on the innovation that the CHIPS Act legislation seeks to empower. And so this is an event, a one-day event, really designed to focus with a specific perspective on design firms and packaging companies, and specifically on the West Coast. So if you are in Region 6, or if you're not, this is a great opportunity to come have a really deep dive discussion on fabs and semiconductors and packaging and design and supply chain. And we're really looking forward to putting this on. I feel like I went through a whole lot, but we're almost at about 20 minutes. So the last thing I'll just sort of remind everybody, this is us, this is the team. We are here to help, here to answer questions as best we can. And we always appreciate everybody's participation. At the end of the day, we can't do much without all of you, without our volunteers and our members. So please call on any one of us anytime if you have anything that you need some help on or you want to help out on. And so I will just stop there and open it up for any comments or questions. I'm going to jump on Brendan's because I think you're actually the first in there. Yes. So in principle, Brendan, you're right. Now, the challenge here, and I think you and others probably know this, is what would that mean to McCarthy's speakership? Would that be would that be the death knell for him as leader of the House, as leader of the majority party, as leader of the Republicans in the House? Because if he signs a deal with the Democrats, the conservatives in his caucus would immediately call for his ouster. The question is, would the Democrats go along with this too? You have to think about that as well. So there's a lot of pressure points that can move in this, and it kind of depends on where the risk reward calculus is for each of these members and each of these factions. I think there is. You kind of hit on the one possible pathway that I think you're going to see a ton of attention on in the next week or so. Certainly, if, and I think it's about a 95% chance right now, the government does shut down this weekend. The media focus is going to be intense on Speaker McCarthy, absolutely intense, because the Senate can get a bill done. The Senate, despite the fact that it's got its politics as well, it's got a pathway to getting something passed. The question then is, what would the House do? The House would never take up almost anything the Senate would have to pass. So everything's going to come down to McCarthy, and I think there is a possibility for sort of a deal with the devil, as some Republicans in the House might call it. But that could be better for the country at the end of the day, and maybe that's the path he takes. I really don't know, but look for that as the main storyline, at least for the first week or so after shutdown. Let's see, anything else coming in? Any other questions? There's there's a lot going on. It's you know, from somebody who's worked in Washington for a long time. This is, in one way, this is very interesting and fun, just the politics of it all. It's also mind-numbingly frustrating and sad. So, you know, we can do what we can, and we continue to do what we can to make our voice and our presence known and our priorities, and get your voices out there. But there are some very big decisions that need to be made in the next few hours, few days, and even few weeks. I don't want to belabor this if no one's got any more questions or comments. I appreciate everybody joining. We have our next Washington update scheduled for 2 weeks from today, as usual. And if nobody has anything else, feel free to contact any of us. And look forward to seeing everybody in a couple weeks. Thanks.